Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Winecast. This is another short cast about an individual grape varietal, and this time we're having a look at a real workhorse of the wine world, one of the most dependable and time-honored grapes out there, even though its image took a few hits a few years ago. We're looking at Merlot, or as Jancis Robinson, one of my favorite wine writers, likes to say, Merlot. As far as anyone can tell, Merlot is native to Bordeaux in France, which is still the site of its most extensive and important plantings. It's the offspring of Cabernet Franc and an until very recently obscure and virtually unknown grape now called Magdeleine Noire de Charente. Thanks to these two parents, Merlot has a relationship with most of the other key Bordeaux red grapes, being a half-sibling to Cabernet Sauvignon and Carmenère through Cab Franc, and a half-sibling to Malbec through Magdeleine Noire de Charente. So, where will you find this grape? It might be easier to turn the question around and ask where you won't find it, as it's the second most planted grape varietal in the world, according to the most recently available data from 2010. Its place at number 2 also represents growth for Merlot, as it got to where it is now from 7th most planted in 1990 and 4th most planted in 2000. Though it did take a little bit of a hit in the U.S. market after the success of a certain wine-themed independent film of the early 2000s, which will not be named here, on the world stage, Merlot is doing very well for itself. Merlot is the most widely planted grape in France, with some estimates suggesting that France is home to about 2/3 of the world's Merlot plantings. Italy comes in second, followed closely by the U.S., where total plantings are up, but Merlot's overall share of U.S. acreage is down a bit compared to what it was in 2000. Many U.S. plantings are in California's San Joaquin Valley, a very warm area where the grape is grown in abundance and, sadly, used to make cheap, low-quality jug wines, though examples from Napa and Sonoma rank among the world's best. Washington State is also home to lots of Merlot, and this grape did a lot to help put Washington on the world wine map. Finally, Spain comes in at number 4, with the most important plantings being in the relatively temperate area of Catalonia, but with plantings all over the country. The grape also figures prominently in the wine industries of Chile, Australia, Argentina, and South Africa, and its status as an international variety is confirmed by its role in the industries of emerging wine-producing countries like China and Japan, where even though total acreage isn't very high, Merlot makes up a large percentage of the grapes produced in those areas. Merlot is a star on its own, but it's worth saying a few words about the special relationship it has with its half-sibling Cabernet Sauvignon. The two are closely related and have a lot in common in terms of their flavor and aroma profiles. As such, they make great complements for each other, and blending wines made from the two grapes can produce an extraordinarily rich and complex wine in which each varietal makes up for gaps in the other. An important role that Merlot plays in blends like these is to soften the intensity of Cab Sauv and to give it a smoother, more accessible presentation while retaining its power and depth of flavor. This is particularly true in a couple of left-bank Bordeaux communes, Saint-Estèphe and Margaux, where Cab Sauv-driven blends tend to feature Merlot in greater concentrations than elsewhere in the Médoc and produce wines proverbial for their softness. The general consensus is, though, that while both grapes can benefit from each other, Merlot does Cab Sauv more favors than Cab Sauv does for Merlot, and you're more likely to see a little Merlot in a wine driven by Cabernet Sauvignon than vice versa, though the latter certainly does happen. Stylistically, there are two broad approaches to making Merlot: an Old World style, most closely associated with Bordeaux, and a New World style. In Bordeaux, the tendency has been to pick Merlot early to foreground its bright red fruit flavors and aromas like raspberry, cassis, and cherry. But this approach also left green and herbaceous notes in the wine like bell pepper, grass, and bay leaf. The New World approach emphasized letting the grapes get very ripe and brought out deep plum and dark fruit notes along with sweet herbal flavors and aromas like fennel and sarsaparilla, as well as chocolate. You should expect some sort of oak treatment in your Merlot, so look for some vanilla, caramel, and other oak-related descriptors, but be aware that the intensity of the treatment will vary widely from producer to producer. In terms of other characteristics, Merlot is a pretty medium-oriented grape, with acidity and tannin staying right in that ballpark, and alcohol does as well, though depending on how ripe the grapes got before harvest, the level of alcohol can creep up to high in some examples. Lastly, don't let the monikers Old World and New World fool you. They're more a stylistic indicator than a geographic one. Merlot grown in warm climate areas of Spain and Italy, or in Israel, for example, has a very New World feel to it. And Chilean Merlots tend to have more in common with Bordeaux than with their jammy cousins in California. So you want to try some Merlot, eh? Where do you start? Easy. Start with the right bank of Bordeaux, where the blends will usually either be driven by Merlot to a high degree or occasionally even be 100% Merlot. Look for wines from Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, or for more of a bargain from Fronsac. Merlot's blending partner of choice on the right bank is its dear old dad, Cabernet Franc, though occasionally Cab Sauv makes a guest appearance. And remember that these wines won't normally tell you how much Merlot is in a given blend. So if you want some idea of that, you'll need to do some research. Head to California for luscious, intense examples of this grape, and maybe up to Washington State for more of the New World, but maybe with just a touch of Old World acidity and tannin structure. If you're looking for a bargain, don't pass up Chilean wines, though as with many aspects of the Chilean wine industry, things can be hit or miss here. Or, since there's so much Merlot out there, take a chance, and if you can find one, try some Merlot from a region you haven't heard of before, or from one that you don't normally associate with Merlot. Speaking of the volume of Merlot out there, a final warning. There's a lot of Merlot out there, which means there's a lot of bad Merlot out there. So try to do as much research as you can before you part with your hard-earned wine dollar. Thanks for joining me for another Winecast. I hope this was interesting and informative to you, and if it was, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section, and I'd be especially curious to hear about any Merlots you've had from unusual or less talked about wine regions. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I'm your host, the Unknown Winecaster, and I'm out. Enjoy the grape, but always enjoy it responsibly.